Okay, good evening. Welcome to tonight, really. My name is Swarzy, and welcome to Radio Academy's Part 2, second webinar for you guys, entitled R.O.A.R, Race on Audio and Radio. This conversation is going to be huge, and you're in the right place. My name is Swarzy. I'm a radio presenter over at KISS. I host the KISS Breakfast Show on a Saturday morning from 6 to 9 a.m. And I'm also the voice of BBC Sounds, music radio podcast. So if you're like, who is that? Now you know what she looks like. So also me. And this event is big for so many reasons. Tonight, we've got such a fantastic lineup of panelists. As you can see, some real powerhouses in the industry. And the objective for tonight is to highlight the positives and the challenges towards having a more racially diverse broadcasting industry within the radio and audio medium. There's many aims of tonight, but I'll just give you three. One of them is to provide a platform for those who dare to share their powerful stories and experiences, both positive and negative, plus some suggested solutions. So excited for that one. Also, let's suggest what the radio and audio industry can do to promote equality of ambition and opportunity in this modern changing world. And three, of all of them, offer some reverse mentoring to those who are in a position of power and influence to assist them to walk the walk and not just talk the talk. So before I hand over to my amazing guests, I thought it'd just be appropriate to add to this introduction that this conversation around race and inclusion is not new. It's one that many of us have been having for a very long time. But if you feel weary and exhausted, if you feel burnt out, welcome, this event is for you. But similarly, if you're new to this conversation and these are conversations you've only been having in the last couple of months, welcome, this event is also for you. Tonight, this is for two camps, those who need to be heard, but also those who need to hear. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand over and introduce you to some of the most incredible people. Binar came on, he was like, Rod, there's actually some big names in this chat. I was like, I know, I can't wait. So tonight we're talking all things truth and solutions. And this webinar is going to focus on people behind the scenes. So let's meet our special guests and find out about their journey into the industry. And I've got to kick it off with the one and only Nicole Logan, station manager, look at her face, station manager at Transmission Roundhouse. Talking all things about her work across the industry by making arts and culture more inclusive and authentically serve diverse audiences. She's in the building. Nicole's with us. Hi, sis. How are you?
Hi, hun. Can I just reiterate, like, I came on this call and I was like, oh, wow, it's real and the energy is correct and the CVs are looking tight. So I was really excited to be joining. But I'm Nicole, or Nikki, as it says. Pronouns are she, her, and I'm the station manager and program producer for Transmission Roundhouse, which is the audio platform that the Roundhouse have in Camden. So you might know Roundhouse Camden, big round venue, we have lots of gigs, but downstairs we actually have a network of studios before COVID, which meant that 11 to 25-year-olds can get into the arts, and for me, get into audio and get into radio. So I've been really lucky in my time there, been at the Roundhouse for about 5 years now, to work with hundreds of people that have gone on to do some really brilliant things, whether that's win British Podcast Awards, Frankie Wells and Initiative Tate with Project Pleasure, whether that's win Best Newcomers at the APAs, and lots of different things. We won a Best Grassroots Production at the APAs in 2016 when I started, which was amazing. So my job really is about finding brilliant talent and having a really diverse roster of people that don't necessarily feel they can go to the bigger platforms, whether that's because of who they are identity-wise, whether that's because of their age, whether that's because of their experience, and putting them in places and positions where they can make content that really speaks to 11 to 25s or 18 to 25s is my specialism, and make content that really sings for them. And now, whether that's podcasts or that's something for Spotify or Audible or something like that, that's what we do.
That's what we do, you know, as if that's a smallish. I don't know how you squeeze all of that in, but a very valuable voice for tonight's conversation. Thank you, sis. Handing over to Ivor next, he will be talking about joining Radio 1 as the first Black producer in 1992 and how he helped the station grow and how he's really trying to come from my background as well. I see you. So open us up, let us know your journey and how did you get to where you are?
I joined the BBC in 1987. As a station, a studio manager. And even though I've been given 3 minutes to do all of this, from a studio manager, worked through Radio 1, Radio 2, Continuity, Radio 3, Radio 5 wasn't there at the time, BBC World Service, and then eventually had the opportunity to be a producer at Radio 1. And at that time, they didn't have a black producer at Radio 1. And then they kind of realized they didn't have an Asian one either. So they cut my post in half and only had a 6-month contract. And the other person had a 6-month contract until they then realized that this was a bit silly. So let's continue on and make me a full-fledged producer. And during the time at Radio 1, introduced New Jack Swing with the Steve Edwards Soul Show because they had Andy Peoples' Northern Soul Show at the time. Brought jungle to the station because they didn't know what jungle was, and so we actually pre-record a jungle show because they didn't trust it. Did UK Top 40, various outside broadcasts with lots of UK artists, and I mean, there's much more, but it was one of those things of, for them, it was kind of like a learning part of the journey in regards to what the music was about and also what the culture was about. But I'll just kind of leave it there, but that's kind of my journey.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. We're coming back to you. You've just got a wealth of knowledge, man, that just spans. So yeah, got some really good questions coming your way. Don't worry, we're coming back. We've got Leanne in the building as well. Leanne also runs her own diversity consultancy where she works with organizations within the audio industry to improve diversity, inclusion, and representation. And when Nikki joined the call, she was like, how are you here, sis? How have you got time? I mean, BBC Sounds podcast is your bag. So yeah, give us the spiel. Who are you and how did you get into the industry?
Yeah, thanks, Swarzy. I guess my journey in was kind of a little bit different because before I worked in audio, I worked in advertising. And when I was in that space, I was doing a lot of like diversity work in places that I worked. And then when that came to an end, I kind of moved my energies into audio. And that's kind of when I started doing the diversity and inclusion consulting stuff. So I worked on the British Podcast Awards last year, Audio Production Awards, London Podcast Festival, to look at how they can kind of improve the representation of not just the awards in general, but kind of the people they're engaging with. And kind of off the back of that, I kind of started learning production, how to produce. So I produced a couple of podcasts. They're both Dope Black Dads and Dope Black Women. And that kind of led me to working at the BBC. So when Ivor said he joined the BBC in 1987, I joined in 2020, and now I work on BBC Sounds, commissioning and developing podcasts across some of the PopHub networks, so mainly Radio 1, 1Extra, and Asian Network.
Amazing. And especially in an era now where podcasts are as popular as anything. Do you know what I mean? That's a really, really big bag to get into. So lots of questions coming your way as well, sis. We got Bernard Achampong in here as well, having over 25 years of music and audio experience. Bernard will be talking about his resilience, emotional intelligence, and leadership skills, and how that's helped him navigate through the industry journey so far. And I saw you on the socials, yeah? I love that you said so far, ... smiley face. And you came on the chat with a whole cup of tea as well. So give us the spiel. I want to know your journey. How did you get to where you are?
Gosh, I think I'm one of those people who was late to the party. I joined the BBC in 2002 when 1Extra launched. Before that, I was in aeronautical engineering. So I was 30 when I joined 1Extra, so you can do the maths. Before that, I was working on community radio stations, pirate radio stations, and so on. My passion is DJing and manipulating sound, so that's really how I got into it. But once I got into the BBC, I pretty much just thought, this is a great organization. I can't stay in one station. So I made sure I moved around. I've worked on the iPlayer campaign, went to Religion and Ethics in Salford, worked on Radio 2, Radio 4, news, you name it. Once I was in the BBC, I moved around. And then I kind of got to a point where I thought, it feels like I'm moving around. I've done almost 15 years within the organization. I'm moving around, but I'm not really getting up. So I left the BBC and joined Premier Christian Radio, where I'm a station manager. I've been there for about 2 years now. I also set up Unedited, which is an audio production company, because I realized there were some frustrations I was feeling within the organization about some stories I wanted to tell. So I had the skill set, I had a team, let's put those stories together. So that's pretty much what brings us here.
I really love what you shared about your background before and to where you got now, because for so many young people you think, oh, I'm in one job and that's all I can do. It's like, no, you can change at any point. And so just that kind of conversation I hope we can tap into later on this evening as well. Thank you so much. And last but certainly not least, we've got Lorna Clarke in the building. Oh, and your background already, you know when you want to pause and just kind of soak in everything that's going on behind her. She started her career as a news reporter and is now responsible for 5 national popular music networks. Lorna Clarke will be sharing her experience within the industry and what we can do to empower our Black community. Good evening, welcome. We would love to know more about you. That's only 2 sentences to give us the goss. How did you get to where you are?
Well, hello everyone. It's good to be on here. I've been in the business so long that there's 2 people here who I first met at least a couple of decades ago. So I guess like most people, I was very interested in radio, but had no idea. No one in my family was even interested in the BBC. But I had an uncle who was a sports photographer for a newspaper, and I thought that was super glamorous. And I would hang out with him. He would go to boxing matches, cricket, he'd do all sorts. And then I realized I wanted to tell stories, so I did a course. And I was prepared to move around quite a bit. So even though I had a flat in London renting, I got my experience working in Newcastle with commercial radio, working in Cornwall. Not many people looking like me, I can tell you, back then, and moving around London. And then finally I got a permanent job working for local radio in London. So I had to move around a lot to kind of go sideways to get like a permanent contract, really, because I was reluctantly freelance. I just kind of took whatever work I could get that meant that I could get paid, so that if anyone asked me what am I doing, I could legitimately say I'm in radio, and that would be my advice. So yeah, I've worked at KISS as a producer, but finished as a director, which wasn't planned. World Service. I've worked at all of the music stations at the BBC and music television. And I've been a head of production, so I know kind of the different bits, which I think is useful. It's something that Bernard has said. You really must grab opportunities when you see them. Life does not go in a straight line. You have to take what you can. So yeah, I love this business. It's flawed, but I know that I can make more changes from within, and I have. And I think for when I hear about stuff that young people are doing, I just find it really exciting, because when I started, the choices, literally, like when I started, there was no KISS, there was no Black music outlet. You had the choice of working at Radio 1, where at the time, I mean, they were just interested in status quo, and I was like, I'm not. I mean, at that time I was into happy hardcore and house, and they weren't doing that. Or Radio 2, which was a bit like the Light programme, or LBC. So like, that was the choice. Or you had to leave London and go to local commercial radio stations, which were more exciting. So it'd be interesting to know, how many people have had to move around, because that's definitely been the mark of my career. I haven't been lucky enough to just sit and wait for stuff, because they haven't seen me.
Amazing. Yeah, we're going to really get into all that everyone has shared. Honestly, we've got 63 people on the chat, which is amazing. So if you've just joined, good evening. My name is Swarzy. You're in the #1 place to be for tonight. Welcome to Radio Academy's second webinar called R.O.A.R, Race on Audio and Radio. And just to say, if you've joined and you've got questions, bring your questions. There's a function at the bottom of your screen where you can type your questions away. We will be doing a Q&A session towards the end of the event. So think of those questions and submit them. We would love to unpack them together. So I'm going to kick off with the first question of the night, and I'm going to send it to your way, Ivor, first. I'm coming to you first. Just because you've got, that wealth that you shared just a minute ago in your intro. So #1 question for tonight, kicking things off. What is your take on how diverse the radio and audio industry is as we currently stand, And in your own experience, how far has it come from your original entrance into the industry? What is your take on the diversity within?
I don't think it's as diverse as people think. I think we see a lot of people in front of the microphone, and we hear about a lot of people who have done producing and, you know, whether it be broadcast assistants or whatever. But to me, the kind of real power lies behind the commissioning. It lies in how you kind of can work with people who are engineers, how you can work with people who actually run stations. And to me, there's that not much power here, there. It has got better, but I think we still got a long way to go, because I think when it comes to radio, things can be done very quickly. Things can, you know, you spark an idea and something comes. Where the challenges are is that sometimes you get those kind of levels where you have that idea and it can't be progressed. And then you then see somebody else do it. And you ask the question, why couldn't that idea be progressed on this station? And you then get some kind of excuse, it's not for the target audience or something like that. So I suppose in answer to your question, I think we still got quite a way to go. And this seminar is one of the things that can help with that. But, you know, if just having somebody in front of the microphone and it looks good is great. It's where that person's development goes after that. Because I believe in every presenter, there's a producer. And likewise, in every producer, there's a music editor or a scheduler, and there's even a person who can actually run a radio station.
Yeah. Yeah, lots of fingers in lots of different pies. I'm going to shoot it over to Nikki and ask the same thing. Yeah, do you say that radio and audio is as diverse as people think? And just jumping off of what Ivor was saying, is it good to then have your fingers in a lot of pies?
Definitely, I definitely think so. So I would say that I came into radio from theatre and television. So I was completely self-taught coming into radio world, didn't have a degree, didn't know anyone, but did know the Roundhouse. And I actually started my first ever sort of radio. I started in the States, and so it's a really different version of radio in Southern California. But we won't get into that. But I would definitely say that I've seen a lot of change. I definitely don't think it's anywhere near as diverse as even the people on this panel. Like, I think everyone in here, unfortunately, is a little bit of a unicorn. So I'm a station manager of an internet radio station, and up until pretty recently with No Signal and Foundation FM, I was just staring around at other female station managers. I would go to all the events, I would go to all the panels, and it's pretty much how we all get to know each other, like, because it's you and someone else, maybe, or it's just you in those rooms, in those circles. And that's why, like, I always celebrate the small wins. I'm always, like, really openly, like, shouting out everyone I know that's a person of colour, especially a woman of colour in audio. Like, I could run the list now, but I might save it till later on, because I find them really, really rare. I definitely think because there was a lot of really brilliant on-air talent that are people of colour, people get very confused. Like, definitely, because we have you, Swarzy, we have Clara, we have Julie, like, we have some really brilliant on-air talent, but then you go into those spaces and there might be more Toms than there are people of colour. Like, I've definitely been in spaces where there are more Johns around a table than there is another woman of colour, and I think that's really normal. But I have seen a lot of change, and I think because of my position, which is kind of out, I've never worked in a big network. I've worked with quite a lot of indies, and through my work with Multitrack, that both me and Leanne sit on the steering group of, we're able to do quite a lot of work in interacting with. So Multitrack is, and hopefully soon to be, an audio diversity and inclusion charity, and their aim is basically to make the audio industry as a whole more inclusive and accessible. So with that, it has meant that I've then been able to meet some really great people across the industry. But because I sit on the outside in sort of internet platform land, our ecosystem looks really different, and our ecosystem looks really diverse and really exciting. We've got the team from No Signal that are like 21, 22, like, they're all really young. They're making such exciting music radio. You've got Foundation FM. So I've known Frankie Wells, one of the founders of Foundation FM, for about 5 years now, maybe a bit longer. And she started that station and that movement with her two co-founders in like a year, because she didn't feel that she could fit into any of the places. She worked at lots of big broadcasters. She could have done, but she decided at like 24, actually what she was going to do was put her time and her effort and her energy into building something that was a safe space for her audiences. So it is changing, but because I think we've got, and like, I would never undo all of the people that came before us. So someone like Frankie or Scully or Jojo from No Signal could run, but I'm seeing such massive gaps and disparity between what's happening in internet broadcasting culture and podcasting and what's happening in major networks. That is what I have to say.
No, thank you. And I'm going to pick up the points around development. I think that's a great point. And just, rather than being vague, there's so long to go or there's so far, what can we do in that time? What are the things that we can kind of do to make that change happen? Throwing it your way, Lorna, really, to understand your experience from the beginning to now, and just shooting that question, in your experience, how far has it come from the time you first stepped into the industry? Has there been big leaps of change in your experience?
So the short answer is yes. I guess I'm more optimistic than maybe others. Why do I say that? Well, like I said, when I started, we just didn't have much choice. If you wanted to do music radio, the amount of people going for the amount of jobs that were available was just incredible. I mean, there are loads more services now. And when you talk about basically young, smart, talented people basically being too impatient to wait for someone to give them the opportunity to do it, they make the opportunity. You're going to see more of that affecting big broadcasters. Why? Because platforms like No Signal, they are talking, and you know what Nikki's doing, you are talking to an audience that we can't get, we fail to get in an authentic way. And you can already see it, they're getting to a point where you have to have proper partnerships so that you can work together to get the more talent onto bigger platforms. But the reason I'm more optimistic is so this job that I have at the moment didn't exist. I'm just coming up to 1 year in this job, and I say this a lot at the BBC when they say to me we can't find the talent, we can't find diverse talent, it's really difficult. It's not true. It's easy for me to find talent. There's just loads. I'm basically inundated. It's embarrassing because I have to say, yes, you are talented, but I haven't got any space. The issue is not about can we find, new innovative talent. No, it's about making room for the talent to be there. So what have I done in the 10 months that I've been there? I've completely restructured my team. This is no mean feat. Those of you who work at the BBC know that things don't change massively quickly. But 5 radio stations, 5 new heads, right? This is not easy, but it's possible. So when people say to me, do I have the appetite to create a diverse workforce at senior level, which is exactly what I was talking about, exactly what Bernard's saying, when you gather so much experience that you literally hit the ceiling. It's like, what else can I do? I understand that. So, I have a new, just amazingly talented head of Radio 2, the biggest station in Europe, Helen Thomas. I have a new Black head of 1Extra, which is a radio station largely about Black culture. This hasn't really happened before. Before it was a shared post. Very important to me that that radio station has its own head. That's Farron McKenzie. He didn't start for 2 weeks, but I'm already bombarding him with work. I have a new head of Asian Network, Ahmed Hussein, really talented. He was a producer. He left and went to Prison Radio, ran Prison Radio as an attachment, and then came back and smashed it. He's the head of Asian Network. And Sam Moy, she's new. She runs 6 Music, and Hayden Jones runs Radio 1. So this is quite unique. It sounds like I'm showing off. I kind of am, because it's unusual to be able to say, come September, I've literally created the whole team. Because normally what happens is it's normal, you inherit your team, you inherit who's there, and you kind of get on with it. I wasn't really, I mean, I was lucky. I was like, no, I'd love to be able to create a new team. And by that, I mean, I'd love to be in a position where each radio station has their own head. So Asian Network has their own, One Extra has their own. And we'll see how we get on, right? But I'm with you, Ivor. It has to be, you know, who's behind me? I remember you when I worked at Radio 1. I mean, that's decades ago, right? But who is behind me? There are people. I mean, I have Janine Kempadu, who's a very talented commissioner at One Extra, but you need more. And so I guess my point is, if you're in a senior leadership position, you have responsibilities, and your responsibilities are to really listen and to, I think someone said here, to walk the walk. You got to walk it. So I will put really talented people in the right place. Hopefully they'll love the job so much they won't leave. But again, that creates another issue. But it's kind of, no, I'm all about it. I'm really, come September when they all start, I can't wait. I've never been in this position. So yeah, taken a long time though, because what's that? A couple of decades to get to a position where you can really influence things. I mean, when I was at KISS, even as a director, it wasn't that easy to influence things, because if it cost money, you couldn't do it. So yeah, if you're a leader, you have to kind of go, well, what's the mark I'm going to make? It's that simple.
Yeah. No, thank you. So much there, isn't there? You're just like, oh gosh. And can I just say, if you are someone watching and you are in a position of influence and you're sitting here, please take notes. Like, there is so much gold from this conversation. Take it back on Teams, take it back to Zoom calls or whatever you're doing, because it's valuable stuff, and change is here, change is happening. And just to hear you say these things, it's like, wow, come September, or even now, there's so much emotion, and it really is encouraging. And you mentioned something, before I come over to you, Leanne, because I want to talk about podcasts in a second, because people always think radio is about presenting, and it is, and it's great, but there's so much that happens around audio. And so I want to give you shine in time, sis. I'm coming. But given that Lorna just said about hitting the ceiling and kind of getting to that top game, and Bernard, you spoke about moving around then and then leaving, you've seen a lot of the industry, but in the places that you've been and the places that you've seen, what would you say is your experience, and how diverse is it now compared to when you first stepped into those places?
How diverse are they now? I think it's something that Lorna talked about, which is who's coming behind you. And like I think you said earlier on, you know, most of the people in these rooms are unicorns, and the unusual or the unexpected. They don't just crop up every day. I know when I joined...
I don't think I'm a unicorn, by the way. I really don't. I don't think I'm a unicorn. I don't think...
You're definitely...
I don't think I'm unusual. I think we're just all talented. It's just the opportunity wasn't there. But yeah, we're not strange.
Yeah, we're not. You're right. We're not strange. We're good at what we do. We just haven't been given the opportunity. Yeah, when I think some of the people that actually are still in the same networks that I started, so a lot of the people that I started with at One Extra are still at One Extra. And they haven't had the opportunity to go as high as they are capable of. So I love exactly what Lorna's doing, and really starting from scratch, just rebuilding the structure and saying, there are other ways of doing this. There are other opportunities for people, and we need to create that. It reminds me of that Coming to America line where, you know, the king's in the car with his wife and he said, who am I to change this? And she says, I thought you were the king. So if leaders are out there and you're listening to this, don't complain about a lack of diversity or diversity problem. You're the person on the throne. Let's see you do something about it.
Change it. Yeah.
Yeah. You know that tweet's going to go viral now, don't you? Someone's going to caption that. Let me jump over to Leanne now. Leanne, talk to us about podcasters. What is this world that you're in, and how diverse is it? The question being, let me run it again. What is your take on how diverse the radio and audio industry is as we currently stand? And in terms of your own experience, how far has it come from the time you first stepped into the industry?
So I love podcasts because it's all about storytelling, and it's a means of storytelling that has kind of lower barriers to entry, I think, than any other form of medium. And I think it's great because no matter how saturated you think the industry is, your story is valid. Like, everybody has a unique perspective, everybody has a story to tell. So, and like, podcasting started out as a bedroom industry, so like you can literally do podcasting from your bedroom. I've been doing it remotely for the last however many weeks from my bedroom, so like anybody can do it. And with that, this is where you kind of see and hear stories that you don't get to hear in like mainstream media. And that's kind of like how I fell in love with podcasting, because like for the first time I was hearing Black women discuss things that I would discuss with my girlfriends, and I've never seen that or heard that on like other radio stations or TV shows, and things like that. So that's kind of why you see like so many amazing podcasts doing so well. Because if you look at like the receipts and 3 shots of tequila as like 2 main examples being acquired by Spotify, the reason they've done so well is because they were kind of one of the first in that area to really engage with that audience and like break through the mold, because they just weren't, this audience wasn't being served anywhere else. No one else was serving young Black audiences, and podcast was just the medium they used to kind of break through that mold. So now like when I'm looking at it, I'm seeing like so many people creating amazing podcasts, and it's great. But what I really want to do, and kind of like what I'm kind of aiming to do, and the team that I work in is aiming to do at the BBC, is just kind of tell more of those stories and like bring more talent in to tell those stories, because we have a job to both inform, educate and entertain, and there are so many kind of different aspects of our society, different stories that we need to tell, and podcasting is such an accessible way to do that. But it's like Lorna was saying earlier, it's like trying to find the space for all these stories, because we just get inundated with so many ideas, and so many of them are so great. It's just trying to find the space for it. And I always kind of encourage people, whenever we do have commissioning rounds, like even if it's not their idea this time, still go away and make it. There's absolutely nothing stopping you from going away and making the content that you want to make. And I just hope that long term we can give more support to up and coming creatives, which is something that we're actually starting to do at BBC Sounds. We announced the BBC Sounds Lab a couple months ago, I can't remember, but it's coming in the autumn. But it's a creator in residency program for creators to like make content that they want to make. So podcasting is great because you can basically do whatever you want. There's no rules, and you can literally do it with hardly any resource. I just want to help create more space to give platform for those stories.
Yeah, you make a good point about stories, you know, and how authentic is that everyone's got a story to tell. There's the platform, go ahead. I remember coming in to record at BBC Sounds, and there was one brother on the decks looking like Dr. Dre with all of the buttons and all of the screens, and I nearly lost myself, you know. I came in, I wanted to daps him up, I was like, oh, what's going on? I'm Swarzy. And I realized, oh, we can't really, you know, we kind of forgot ourselves a minute, because I didn't see a Black guy and he hadn't met me before. And so just to tweak and just to probe a little bit more in your world, Leanne, when you look around, is it diverse? Because if you've got all of these diverse stories coming in, but no one can resonate with them, how does that work in your world?
It's interesting because kind of when you have people that are like presenter producers, and a lot of those people kind of create their own content and create it independently and put it out into the world, and then when we're kind of, and other broadcasters as well, kind of are looking at commissioning, we work with a load of independent production companies, and they will have their base of producers and sound engineers and people that they work with. So what I'm finding is, it was kind of what Ivor was saying earlier, is that the talent in front of the mic, even in podcasting, it can be super diverse. They have great stories to tell, but sometimes the missing piece is the people behind the mic who are creating that content, and that often comes from the production companies who are making the content for us. So kind of one of the another thing that I'm really hot on and I'm always looking at is kind of if you look at the problem, so it's the supplier base. So how can we diversify the supplier base? It's just looking at more organizations that we haven't worked with before, and how do we work with them? We get to know them. We kind of get to know where their strengths lie, what content they like to make, kind of what projects would they be suited for, because things come up all the time. And very often I find, and this is not just a BBC thing, this is a creative thing in general, people will just work with people they know or people that they're used to working with. So they'll just give the people the work that they know, and that's just not a sustainable model, because then you're just completely missing that whole group of fantastic creatives that are really suited for the work. But some people just may feel like they don't want to take the risk, or it's really short turnaround, but it's worth taking the risk to get the job done if you're going to bring in new people that are going to do a really good job, that are from different backgrounds. Because when we're doing commissioning, it's not just about the production companies and the producers and the suppliers. It's like finding designers to create the artwork, finding videographers and photographers to do the shoot. It's like there are so many different creative people that are involved in the process, and there are so many opportunities to bring in new people. And I think that's something that we all need to focus on more, and that's the main thing that will help us diversify the pool of people that are making the content, because that is kind of where the lack of diversity is.
Yeah, I'm going to grab that point and throw it to Ivor's way as well, just because you made a great point around, you know, if you're young and you're watching this, there are so many jobs, so many roles available within radio and audio. Let me encourage you, there is a space for everyone. And just another question as we move on, do you have any examples in the broadcasting industry or anywhere where racial diversity has worked? We know that when teams are more diverse, the content is better. And so I just wondered, in your years of experience, if you had to pinpoint, put a toothpick in the timeline of a project you worked on, or where there was racial diversity, where really just, amplified voices or the content to make it as good as it could be.
I suppose if I had to look at it in a radio perspective, when you have groups of people working, let's say on a breakfast show or on a drive show, or as you say, on a particular project, which could be a series of a sort, then you've got to have different people working together to kind of get that achievable aim. And I suppose sometimes, as Leanne said, if you stick with a certain group of people, you can become stale. So it's encouraging where you might feel that there isn't a black person in a breakfast show, to have that black person in that breakfast show. Or if there's not a woman in a lunchtime or on a drive time show, to have that person there. Because if you look at radio now, it always seems to be, you've got a male doing breakfast, you then might have a female doing mornings, you might have a female doing lunch, you have a male doing drive, you don't have anybody, you don't have a female doing breakfast as such, you don't have even a female doing drive. It's kind of mixing those kind of things up. And I mean, even...
We do.
Oh, okay.
We do.
I know you do. And, but that's what I'm trying to say. It's taken time for that to become normalized, where before it feels like certain program controllers or directors are saying, no, you know, a woman doesn't work well on breakfast, or a black person doesn't work well on drive because they might drive an audience. Those are the things that we need to encourage more. And I think, as you said, it's taking those risks. If we don't take those risks, we don't then have the chance to explore those audiences that are out there but are not getting service.
Yeah, just throwing it over to you, Lorna, saying, we've got that. So what difference does it make? That's the question I'm trying to get to. What difference does it make, or have you got any examples where racial diversity has really worked for the content or worked for radio to make that project or make whatever?
I think Ivor is hit the nail on the head. If you think about it, if you have an office where everyone is exactly the same, and you come into the office on Monday, what kind of weekend did you have, person A? They describe it. It's exactly the same weekend as person B, person C. But this is not a very interesting conversation, right? So they all watched the same thing. They spent their leisure time in the same way, ate the same food, talked about the same things, went to the same places. The beauty of having a truly diverse workforce in all ways, and I've got lots of work to do, right? I'm in this job and I know what I need to do. We will get to that point. But if you have a truly diverse workforce, it means you get better ideas. Simple. It's just much more interesting. I remember talking to the Asian Network team, and they explained to me how big something like the wedding market is, right? I thought I knew. When they explained it, I was like, that's entirely different to my experience of weddings as Black Caribbean or someone who was English. And it's like, straight away, we started talking about podcast ideas, which is a thing that Leanne talked about, where you can get an idea, get a story, and boom, it's something else. But when I said we have that, I've got 5 stations, but 3 of the breakfast shows are by women. So Harps is on Asian Network, Zoe Ball on Radio 2, and Lauren and Six Music. And that's not by accident. Like, they're the best. And it's kind of, it's in this modern age, you just can't have those things that Ivor was talking about, where it's nonsense to talk about, you know, you can't, you have to be a certain person to do Drive. I mean, there's a woman doing Drive on Radio 2. It's literally, how well can you talk to your audience? That's it. And all of these barriers around, I mean, that's just protectionism. That's just saying, we'll like to keep things as they are, but it won't be us. It'll be all of the different audiences literally being impatient. If you won't give me what I want, then they'll go somewhere else. That's why you have no signal. They've come up with an idea which works for them, and it'll fly. And I'm not saying that you know, that's how it should always be, because big platforms have a responsibility. But if you have proper diversity, you can build big ideas.
Yeah.
In fact, just one last thing. I worked on a thing called the Electric Proms, which was like a TV idea. Some of those ideas would never have happened if we didn't have a mixed team. So it was all about trying to put either orchestras or different types of genres together. And so I remember one show we did, which was Dizzy Rascal. At the time, he was absolutely the most important thing. But at that time, Black music wasn't really live. It was, you know, with a DJ. It wasn't really performed live with a band. And he amazingly agreed to perform part of his set with a punk band, a punk rock band. And after that moment, festivals, everyone, live band for Black music. And you know, he doesn't get credit for really trailblazing that, but that only happened because we had a really mixed up team. They were like, well, why don't you put this with that? And can that work? And one person really knew Dizzy and another person was really into punk, and it was like, and that was at the Roundhouse. That was at your place, Nikki. So you need diversity for that reason. Apart from the fact that it's proper business sense, you get better ideas.
Yeah, I'm going to jump over to the Roundhouse actually, because I'm sure there's a bag of gems over your way, Nick. Just, I want to know, how do you build those teams then, or how do you bring in different voices? Because on one hand, there's what Bernard said, there's people in their places and they're not moving. People don't always move quickly from their job. So if people aren't moving, how do you bring an array of different and diverse voices and thinking and all of that? So to your question, what are the benefits to the organization and also the listeners when the team is diverse? How do you do it, Nick?
So I think I'm in a really fortunate position that we're like a sub-brand within a much bigger brand. And so the Roundhouse has done quite a lot of work because of everything everyone's had to do, the reason why we're having this conversation, because of what's happened with the Black Lives Matter movement, to really assess how it feels about its own diversity and inclusion policy. So I won't speak in necessarily to that. But with Transmission Roundhouse, so I'm a part of a regional team. It's me and 2 other people. We made a decision, so me and my head of department at the time, Marie Horner, now Derek Richards. So I'm really fortunate to have 2 line managers who are a Black man and a white woman, who made decisions really early on that they wanted their team to be incredibly diverse. So they wanted their management team to be all female. So we had an all female production team, broadcast assistant team, because we just wanted to make sure that we were arming up and giving really entry level opportunities to an incredibly diverse set of people, and that we could try to make inclusive environments. So I'm really here for the diversity conversation, but I do think it belongs in 2019, and we really need to start talking really loudly about inclusion. There's absolutely no point bringing in all of these brilliant people of colour if they want to leave the second they walk into your organisation, and I see it happen a lot, all of the time, and that is why a lot of people go off and start their own stuff, and I live to see that. Like, I really want to see that. I want to make sure that big brands and big organizations make sure, and big platforms make sure they're doing all of the work. Don't just hire them, keep them. That's really, really important. And so with TR, I like to set that standard really early. So I work with 18 to 25-year-olds. And so I know that any of them know their value and their worth and their skill set when they go and work at the BBC, when they go and work for Spotify, when they go and work for something else. And we did that by making sure really, really simple things. We pay invoices on time. Or I make sure that I am personally getting on the phone to finance to make sure, why is this invoice not being paid on time? We make how they get signed up to being one of our suppliers, if we're working with them in a paid way, is super easy. Like, sometimes a lot of the things for different audiences is that these systems don't make sense. They don't make sense for anyone in the system, like, apart from the people that made it. So of course new people won't want to join in. They're just going to leave. Why? They just make their own system. So how can we make sure that those systems are really, really easy for people to access? The Roundhouse, we want to make it accessible and inclusive. So how do I make everything transparent? How do I make sure that my commissioning rounds are incredibly transparent? We put everything on social media. We're putting everything in all of the WhatsApp groups. We're putting everything where I know our audience, 18 to 25, live and breathe their life. It's on Instagram, it's across social media. I'm making sure that I'm checking in with people like you, Swarzy, that they have real like cultural clout in those areas. And then for my team, so my team before COVID, I was really, really lucky to have a majority team of Black women. That's so rare. I've never seen anyone else do that. We would come into the Transmission Roundhouse studio, and the two first people you would see would either be me and a white person, or me and 3 Black women. And that's exactly how I wanted that, because of the statement that I wanted to make sure that they knew from the ground, this could be normal. This could be incredibly normal. Like, find it weird if you go into a space and you're the only person that looks like you. And I could do that because I'm playing with, like, you know, a really small pond, like it's a really small area, but it's about making sure that anything that we do is set with the intention that, like, we can define the normal. Like, normal should be, a version of normal should be an internet radio station headed up by Black women and a young Black man. It could be headed up by 2 Asian women, and that platform could speak into anything. It doesn't necessarily need to speak into British female Asian culture. It could speak into punk. That should be really normal. And so with the Roundhouse, the station doesn't, with Transition Roundhouse, it doesn't necessarily look into Black youth culture, because I'm a Black woman. It speaks into youth culture, and I have to make sure that I've got the correct brains, the correct minds, the correct energy that puts the correct people in the room. 1, and quite a lot of like policy work has gone into that, but 2, make sure that I'm creating an environment where they're going to tell me, because I could have them in the room and they could all be scared stiff to say anything to Nikki about their ideas, their show ideas, that they want to release, you know, shows every single day for 3 weeks because they think that's going to work really well with the football. Like, I need to make sure that the environment for them feels safe, inclusive and creative, because that's how I'm going to get the best out of them. And a good example for that would be our latest political podcast, Interconnected Voices, which is produced and presented by Cherise Hamilton-Stevenson. And so she came to us with that idea because she wanted to have really frank talks about race in early 2019. The same way that we're having those conversations now, she wanted to have it with that tone and that directness about knife crime, around sex work in 2019, that radical. In order to get the best from her, I needed to make sure that she felt safe enough for us to have those conversations, and also for us to disagree going into those conversations.
I'm just going to jump over to Leanne as well, actually, and that's a really good point. It's about, when you do have those voices, you want to not only retain people, but have the environment there where people feel comfortable enough to present their ideas, like not to feel clamped up as though what they're about to say could get them in trouble or there's nowhere to find them in. And so just for the people logged on, we love you. Get your questions in. The Q&A is going to kick off in about 10 minutes or so. I'm going to do a loop round, and I want to know, what are the best and worst experiences you've had in radio or audio? I'm coming to you, Leanne. And what was your coping strategy to stay in the industry? If you could give me the quick fire, because we got to open the Q&A at past. But yeah, if you were watching last week as well, so many guys had great experiences, and also were really honest about those that weren't so great. So it's a platform to be as honest as possible. But heading over to you, Leanne, what's your best experience and worst experience, and what was your coping strategy to stay in the industry?
Firstly, I just want to echo what Nikki was saying, and just let's normalize Black people, Asian people, ethnically diverse people talking about regular things other than identity. Let's normalize that.
Yeah.
That's cool. So my worst experience, before I worked at the BBC, I worked in commercial radio, and they had only really just started their kind of podcasting kind of slate, and they really just shut me out of the commissioning meetings, and it was an all-white commissioning team, and every time I would present to them any content that was Black-led or talked about Black issues or had a Black voice at the forefront, they were just like, yeah, like the station is just not ready for those sorts of ideas. And looking at that organisation as a whole, usually when I would go into these organisations, I'd want to, you know, fight the good fight and like push and push and push, and I was like, you know what, because I was only females there as well, so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna take my energy elsewhere, which is what I did. And I was like, let me work with these bigger organisations that are actually invested in diversity inclusion, or they want to be, and work with them and like help make more opportunities for more people. That's why I went and worked with the British Podcast Awards and like Audio UK, because these men here at the British Podcast Awards, they did not know who George the Poet was until last year, and I'm being so deadly serious, and that is not a bad thing at all. But what I'm saying is, if you don't know how to reach these people, get someone in who can help kind of steer the way and bring other people in, because that is just paved the way for like so many other kind of creatives in colour in the podcasting space. I'd say my best experience is kind of where I am now, and kind of being able to work in a space where they are so open to kind of ideas, not just around kind of Blackness and Black culture, but kind of also just normalizing the fact that diversity, that everything that we do should be centered around diversity, from the people who welcome the programs to the guests that we have on programs to the people who are designing our artwork, because I personally haven't had that before in a job. So that is kind of my best experience at the moment, yeah.
No, that's amazing. That's a huge experience. Thank you, sis. Bernardo, I want to jump over to you as well and ask the same question. Your best experience, your worst experience in radio, and what's your coping strategy to stay in the industry?
Okay, my best experience, and I've got to salute Lorna for this. She doesn't know about this. I was working on a program for Radio 2. They had a very heritage audience. We had to bring that audience down. I mean, literally, we were getting requests every week for, could you give my grandma 100th birthday shout out? And we had to bring that audience right down. Now, I thought I was doing something good with that program, but you never really know, because, you know, and I had an email that I needed to go and see the controller, Bob Shannon. Now, Bob is a big deal. So I was fretting. I was actually in Salford, got on the train, come down, worried all the way. As I walked into his office, Lorna was sitting outside. Lorna's desk was outside Bob Shannon's office. And that actually made me feel so at peace that there's someone here who understands what we're going through. And I think a lot of people have seen that. When you get into a particular space and you recognize someone, you go, wow, okay, this can work. So thank you, Lorna, for that.
I didn't do anything, but that is like Nikki's point.
Yeah.
Where if you see someone that you can relate to, suddenly it's not as hard.
It's not as hard.
It doesn't mean that they're going to think exactly the same, because we're not the same, but it just makes it feel a bit more representative. Yeah. I mean, I've been in that situation a lot, obviously, at the BBC, because it's a big, complex organisation, and I've been in plenty of scenarios where I walk in the office, they have, you know, or a meeting, they have no idea who I am, and they're like, "Can I help you?" I'm like, "This is my meeting." So it's like, yeah, it makes a huge difference, but I think you have to certainly now, I feel much more confident about you bring your whole self to the job, really be you. And so I would say in the early days, I couldn't do that. I found that really hard. It's like the Bernard thing. It's sort of, I'm intimidated, and I think I just need to blend in. And really, you just look at how the industry has changed. You look at how important it is to try and be authentic. You can't be authentic unless you be yourself, because after a while, it just becomes too difficult to keep that up. You have to bring yourself.
And just to add to that, Lorna, because before I started the BBC, like, I'd heard loads of things about it. People were telling me all sorts of things, like both positive and negatives. And then I saw a black woman was running all the networks. I was like, this is sick. Maybe this is the place for me, you know?
This is sick. I love that. No, but honestly, and I know I would say this, wouldn't I? But I have stayed at the BBC for as long as I have, through all of the troubles, through all the highs, through all the lows, because I actually believe in what it's supposed to do. I love what commercial radio does. That's like a big half of my career. You know, I'm at that point where I think about the industry, but the BBC is publicly funded. That means it's for everybody. So, like, we have a real mission to try and talk to everybody. And this is why it is hard, but you can't be on the outside throwing stones. You've got to be in trying to make a difference. That's why things like podcasts, internet radio, all of these other areas who can do things quicker than we can, they should be feeding into the bigger industry. Plenty of people I know who they will come from those areas and they will end up in the BBC, because the BBC will need that. We have to be universal, and it's an ongoing job.
Yeah. And it's a really good mindset to have, to think, I'm trying to reach everyone, therefore diversity filters back in, and hopefully the team looks diverse because you're trying to reach everyone. But now I'm just going to come back to you and ask for your worst moment, and also your coping strategy that kept you in the industry, which was hard because you've been jumping around. So give me the many coping methods.
Well, the one thing that I've realized is, firstly, if you're 6'4" and fully melanated like me, you can't blend in. There's no blending in. You are going to stick out. So make the most of it. The other thing is, I'm really cautious about attributing behaviors to a brand or an organization, because at the end of the day, it's people, and it's different people that you have to work with, and different people have different points of view and mindsets and so on. So I can't get vexed at the BBC or this particular radio station, or it's just people who turn up and say the right thing or say the wrong thing on a day-to-day. And, you know, the way I cope with that is just picking my battles, preserving my energy, and just praying my way through it when I can't.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Thank you. Jumping over to Ivor as well, your best and worst experience in the industry, and also your coping mechanism.
I suppose one of my best experiences was being main managing director of Choice FM, which at the time I was a managing director. And so you could say it was quite a unique position in the sense that you went from the boardroom to the studio. The DJs and everyone had that kind of connection, and likewise, working with commercial radio, you knew what your goals and your targets and everything were.
You were a pioneer then. It was just like, it was a big deal when Choice came along.
Yeah, and for me, one of the disappointments is that there's not another choice. There's not other choices, because at the moment they're trying to raise money for a plaque and all that kind of stuff to remember what Choice did. But, you know, we should be looking ahead as to what other stations should be out there. I suppose one of the disappointments is, and I've, you know, as we keep it real, is when you leave a station, and even when you leave a station when you don't want to leave a station, because we can become loyal to a brand for so long that we're not as fresh as we would think we are, and other people might have other ideas. And I suppose coupled with that, the coping mechanisms are, you are creative, you've got your ideas are worth something. So just because somebody doesn't want you in a particular radio station or in a particular place doesn't mean that you haven't got the ideas, you haven't got the creativity. You just got to meet up with other people who are like-minded and build your own. And that's taken time, because sometimes you think, wow, they just let me go from this job, or wow, I've just been told that this has been cut or this commission's not there. Doesn't mean that it's no good. It just means that it's not suitable for that brand or for that platform. But you should be able to believe in yourself to be able to go and do whatever you want to do. If you believe that that audience is there, you should be able to go and do that on a different platform or on your own platform. So you can do it.
You know, I just want to, like, I can't tell you how much that resonates. There are so many times where you have about a 10 millions idea and you're trying to squeeze them all into the same platform. And you're realizing this is a square trying to fit into a circle. This is a triangle trying to fit, you know, it doesn't fit. But that switch of, oh, I don't need to do it all under one brand. I can move about and I can work with different people. Thank you for that. Like, that is a very much light bulb moment for lots of us who are juggling about 10 plates, because yeah, you're creative, you've got ideas on the go, but yeah, that advice, thank you for that. Yeah, light bulb, light bulb, light bulb. Nikki, let me jump over to you before I go to Lorna as well. Your best and worst experience in audio or radio and your coping mechanism.
So I think that my best experience working with audio has been with multi-track. I think we're an incredibly inclusive and diverse team in terms of our identities, but also in terms of our experiences and our viewpoints. And we have really frank, really honest conversations about when and we hold each other accountable to our choices. So I'm really excited for multi-track to share what it's been working on when we do in September, because actually we've really gone away and used lockdown to really analyse how we're going to do what we're going to do and how we're going to bring a wider industry with us to actually have much harder conversations than I think a lot of people would feel comfortable to have, which feeds into my worst experience, because actually we would not be having this conversation if we didn't have a race issue in audio. Like, we do. Let's make that really clear. Like, it's not easy. Otherwise we wouldn't be having this conversation at all. And I've definitely been in a lot of spaces, I'm not going to name them, and I've been in meeting spaces with some incredibly senior people and they're not coming on with us on the journey. I really want them to. I've been in spaces where either I've been pitching ideas, so either as a producer, or I've been in there in my capacity as a multi-track, or I've been in there in my capacity at the Roundhouse, in really different spaces, and not every senior person is coming with us. I think my appeal would be, you have to be the change you want to see, and the change is just happening. And what we're seeing is basically all the talent, all the diversity, all the energy, all the life from future generations and different types of creatives, that's all going to happen regardless. You can bring it into your organization or it's just going to pass you by. So I'm really excited to hear what everyone's been doing in those senior positions, to see that work is happening, but it's not happening everywhere. So I think that's my worst one. And my coping mechanism is it, and it's my advice always for any young creative or creative that I work with, is that be the change you want to see, bring everybody else with you. So that is why I'll be have to bring Charlotte here with me, have to bring Camilla from Foundation with me. If we're going to do this, everyone's going to do it together. And I will say that on this webinar, where I don't know who else is listening to it, I would do that in a meeting room at the Beeb. I would do that in a meeting room or on a call with Audible. I will do it with anyone, because I think we have to, if you're in those spaces, I definitely put it on me. I've been in this industry for 5 years, not very long, but I will put it on me that if I'm not radically making it better for anyone behind me, I'm actually making it worse. That's my coping mechanism.
Thank you, sis. Thank you so much. And yourself, Lorna, as well. We're opening the Q&A real soon. Yeah, your best and worst experience in radio and audio, and also your coping mechanism. Oh, you're on mute.
I was having a sneaky crisp. I didn't want to drown you out. My best has to be around when you spot great talent, and I'm not talking about on-air talent. You spot great talent, they are patient enough to trust and wait for an opening, because again, you gotta create that, and then they get to a spot. That's amazing. I can point to, if she's listening, she's going to be so embarrassed, but I'll say it anyway. But Shola, who is now producing the breakfast show at Six Music. And I remember when met her, she was doing podcasting, she was freelancing. We just had a chat. She was so exciting. She's nothing to do. She didn't do radio. She didn't think she could ever get into the BBC. But I just thought, wow, you're so full of ideas. Why don't we have more people like you? And we didn't have a job, basically, which is the usual nightmare. This is what I mean, where finding people is not the problem, it's getting the job. And she freelanced, prepped. I said to her, this is what you need to do to get an interview. She wasn't lucky the first time, then she smashed it. AP, I don't know, 2 years later, producer, not on a black station, black woman, but on Six Music. I think people like that are going to go far. She's amazing. So that's exciting. Now, I could give you loads of examples of people who you just see something and then they get on. Worse is when people make assumptions about me. They don't know anything about me, but they look and they just assume. I've had people look at me, senior people. I did like an amazing couple of years, great, like work appraisal, and they just couldn't think of what to say. This is years ago, and he just went, well, why don't you just smile more? I thought, wow, is that all you can do? You just think I'm the angry woman in the corner, and that just annoys me. So yeah, when people make assumptions and they either underestimate or whatever, underestimate at your peril. Coping mechanism is, it's going to sound boring, but to be resilient, you need to look after yourself. You need to have good well-being. You need to have a support system, people who can keep encouraging you, and you do need to be healthy. It really does matter. Even people who say they're only interested in music, I say to them, well, you better read about the world, about news, whatever it is, every day. You need to know what's going on around you. So yeah, I would say keep healthy, stay in touch with the world. Don't just make your world too small. And yeah, seek out feedback, even if it's bad. I will always be honest. So if someone comes to me and they say, for 10 years I've been trying to get this particular job and I can't get it, what do I need to do? My first question is, are you good? Are you any good? And sometimes people don't hear that, but when you have to say to someone else, yeah, I am good because of this, you're literally making your CV come alive, and it helps. So they kind of go, well, what do you mean, am I good? If you know you're good, you should be able to say it. Because if you can't do it, you can't be relying on loads of other people to do it. You've got to be your own billboard. So those things help me. When I'm trying to get a job, I just say, well, am I any good?
Yeah.
Yeah, I am.
Hire me.
Yeah, I am. So you should give me a job. Because otherwise the alternative is, actually, no, I'm not very good. What is that? No, you've got to be able to sell yourself in an authentic way. You've got to be able to do it.
That brings me nicely to the Q&A, actually. So the Q&A is popping at the moment. Andrew Charles got a good question. I've worked in radio. Actually, given what Lorna just said, Andrew, I hope this is going to help. I've worked in radio for almost 2 decades. In addition to my 9-to-5 job, I've worked at a hospital, community, national and local stations, and pretty much created opportunities for myself. I've pretty much done every job in the radio station apart from run one. And when I go in for interviews, I still get told that I don't have enough experience. Is this because of my ethnicity? As sometimes I feel like throwing in the towel. So I suppose, yeah, just sending that back your way, Lorna, what would you say to someone who still isn't getting those interview jobs? And how do you measure good? If I know I'm good, how do I measure that?
But it might be, and I don't know enough detail, right? But it might be that they're actually going for the wrong jobs. We heard earlier that there's so many different roles. I know it can look like it's a choice between presenting or producing, but that's not it. It's kind of the new head of 1Xtra hasn't made a radio program. They're a marketing person, but they're running a radio station. So there's loads of things that you can do that might get you to where you want. So maybe it's time to reappraise step back and go, am I actually going for the right jobs?
Thank you. Yeah, really good question. And thank you again, Andrew, for getting involved in the Q&A. Got one for you, Leanne. I've got a podcast idea that unfortunately was not picked up by other editors or producers that I'm now doing myself. I don't have a mass following on social media, and I would like your advice on how I can get my podcast out there and get the support in order to achieve a great audience reach. What would you say to Lisa? Shouts to Lisa.
I'd first kind of look at your podcast. So who is your target audience? Kind of what are they interested in? And like, how can you engage with that audience? Like, what other touch points can you use to engage with that audience? When you're looking at building your podcast audience, it's not something that happens overnight. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of perseverance. So think about kind of how much energy you're willing to put into it, and that's kind of how much return you're going to get into it. And there are different ways you can look at building your audience. One of the really great ways you can do is like sharing audiences by collaborating with other podcasters and bringing on different contributors and collaborators. Because one thing you need to remember about podcasting is that it's such a collaborative industry. We're not in competition with each other. So sharing audiences is a great way to kind of grow your platform, really engage on social media. Because Instagram is the quickest way to build any audience to do with whatever it is that you're talking about on your podcast. So really leverage social media to engage with your audience, have those conversations, find new contributors and people. I literally find so many people on Twitter, like creatives, contributors, collaborators. I literally find so many people on there. Leverage social media to engage with people and build your following and build your audience. And it takes time, but just invest the time and like keep at it and persevere. And once you grow your audience more and you really establish yourself and your podcast voice, really listen to what your audience are saying. What do they like about your program? What do they don't like? What more do they want to hear from you? And really incorporate that into your podcast series. So it's really just about finding your audience, listening to them and really engaging with them, is what I would say.
Yeah, it jumps back to the feedback point as well. Yeah, thanks, Leanne. Bernard, I'd love your thoughts on this one. Someone anonymous, someone lurking in the Q&A has asked, would love to hear what people's vision of a diverse industry physically looks like. What areas most need improving for you? Great question. Thank you so much, Mr. Anonymous.
So for me, I think Lorna is leading the way, because my idea would be, what we've done with the industry is we've built it based on what we thought a TV industry was and what we thought a hierarchy structure was. And I would just strip all of it down and start again. I would just say, think like what Scully and the guys are doing with No Signal, like Affinity Extra are doing with the gospel world, is just start again. What do we want to hear on radio and how do we make that happen? And then bring the people together and go, okay, these are the elements we need. Now we've got to find a way of making it work, rather than going, here's a traditional radio structure, here's a traditional audio organization structure. Where do we put people in to make things work? Redefine it for yourself.
Can I push you on that? Does that sound easier said than done? Because how do you then strip everything when people are comfortable in jobs, comfortable in places, comfortable in thinking patterns? Could you give some tips, or maybe throw it out to the whole panelist as well, some tips on what that really looks like to strip back and to start again? What tips would you give?
Well, it's taken Lorna almost a year, 2 years to try and get that done. A year to get that done. And it's going to take another year to embed that, because there'll be other people who are coming up who feel like that was my route. Now what's going to happen? I thought I was going to be the next in line. Where am I going to be? You do have to start small, I think. I don't think you can take an entire organization, but you've got pockets of people doing stuff. So what we did with Unedited was we came together as 3 producers. I don't know who's the leader. I don't know who's the manager. I don't know who's looking after invoices. We're just going to make it work. And after 2 years, we thought, okay, we need someone to understand where the bank details are and someone to pay the invoices. Okay, let's build that structure now. But you've got to kind of start from scratch with what you've got, rather than saying, how do we make this fit into everything we know about business?
And just reversing a little bit as well, thinking, okay, if my goal is to reach everyone and my goal is to make good content for both us and listeners, actually that's exciting. That's exciting to think, oh, how can I restructure this in a way that benefits everyone? And just to come over to you as well, Ivor, you made a really good point about teams being diverse, because when things happen like a George Floyd moment, And let's be honest, a lot of our colleagues didn't quite know, or didn't have the language, didn't know how to engage and respond, because some teams didn't have the eyes, the ears, the heart to really put language to that on air, let alone off air. And so when you talk about some of the serious content that as broadcasters you need to talk about, but also people behind the scenes producing it, what areas would you start with? This question is about what does diversity look like? What area would you begin with?
I think one of the areas I would start with is newsrooms. And why I say that is because I've had a personal story in regards to when I worked at Newsbeat at Radio 1. And at the time, it was only myself as a producer and Gillian Joseph, who's now on Sky. And the time came when, and this is the story, the time came when we had the O.J. Simpson trial. And we sat around the newsroom in the morning just before, 12:15 when Newsbeat was on. And we had Ian Parkinson and various others, Rod McKenzie, some big hitters who were in that newsroom. And the discussion just went as to, well, when the guilty verdict comes in, I want you to do this, I want you to do that, I want you to do this. And they said, any questions? And I asked a question and I said, so what happens if the jury comes back and says it's innocent? And it was like, what? I said, what happens if the jury comes back and says that he's innocent? And someone came to me and said, so do you think he's innocent? I said, no, I didn't say that. I said, what happens if the jury goes back and says? So it was like, there wasn't that kind of provision as to what it went one way, what it went the other way. I like to believe that the BBC would think differently. But newsrooms are really important places where you have agendas for news. What's going to be the news leading here, there, the other way? And sometimes when those agendas are set, you kind of get a reflection of what the channel's about. And I think that a newsroom is very important to any radio station, in regards to how it feels, what's the talk. And I think that's one place I would definitely work on, where it should be more diverse. Yeah.
That's a great point, boy. Like my mind didn't even go there, but newsrooms, let me put that
Absolutely.
on top five. Say again?
Sorry, I said, no, absolutely. Newsrooms are one of the places that, you've got an editor. You might have reporters there, but who's that editor? Who's the editor or producer of the day? Who's setting that news agenda so that you can include lots of different stories, not just certain stories that you expect to hear. Yeah. And you can draw in new audiences from that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And like you said, a different outcome, planning that one as well as the one you made as well. Yeah. I'd love to just get a quick round, actually. I'm looking at the time. We've got to be off by 8. This conversation is banging. Let me jump to you, Nikki, and ask the same question. What would you like to see when we talk about diversity, and what area would you start with first? You're on mute, by the way, Sis. Oh, no, you're off.
So I think I would wind the conversation back and I'd talk about inclusivity. Like, let's take diversity off the table because it makes it seem like it's somebody else's party, and actually we're about, especially if you're in a bigger organisation, it's everyone's party. So at TR I have a really specific audience I have to talk about, 18 to 25, so I don't necessarily have to speak into someone that falls out of that, and that's just to do with our funding. But in most spaces you need to talk about how can I make sure that everybody can bring themselves into the spaces. And how can I make sure this is somewhere they want to be? Like, I think a lot of the time we assume that a lot of people want to come to the party, but we haven't worked out why they're not there. What happens if they actually never wanted to show up? What happens then? And actually I often find that's a more interesting place to start that conversation. What if they're not here because they don't want to be? And then how will we make sure this is a place they want to be? So that's probably where I would start. Did that answer the question?
Yeah. No, perfect. I'm just looking at all these questions coming in. All right, I'm going to be quick and fired with these ones. Lorna, you're leading the way, man. Give us the tips, give us the source on how you do it. So, what area would you begin with first in order to see diversity as we want to see it?
I mean, again, I think my experience, it really isn't that different to the people on this call. It really isn't. If you're passionate about something, then you can't give up, because then you can't be considered. But in terms of diversity, I really think the inclusive culture is kind of the basis. You can create the most complex diversity document, But once you've hit those numbers and you've hit those targets, if people don't feel that they're being heard, then it's all for nothing. That doesn't mean that targets aren't important, because I think, as Nikki said, you cannot assume that people will logically understand what you're trying to do. They're quite happy, actually. They've got a job, it's all cool. They're like, why are you asking me to have this like really complicated life, as they roll their eyes? It's like, why? So you do need targets, because that kind of the belt and braces approach. But yeah, that's only half the story. I would like, you know, I've got what, 320-ish people in my sort of responsibility on air and off air. Even if I get to the point where I get all the targets right, and I'm not there yet, but I know it's what I need to do, even if I get there, if people are really unhappy, but I'm swanning around going, yeah, I love this place, it's just not working, you know. So I think you're right about the inclusivity culture. You got to really want to be there, and I want that, because I want them to evangelize about what we're doing. And it, you know, if you feel good about where you work, it's infectious. It's like all the people around you will catch it, and they'll all start talking about what you do. So
yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, we want to be at the party. So yeah, I love that, Nix, as well. And for yourself as well, Leanne, and then I got to wrap up with 1 or 2 last questions.
I really agree with kind of what Nikki and Lorna were saying, but also kind of say that leadership is a massive thing as well. We need, and this is the massive problem within audio in general, is that our leadership boards across a lot of the main organisations and indies, they're just not diverse enough, and these are the people that are the decision makers. They're deciding like what content we're making, like who goes on air, kind of who's making this content. And until we kind of diversify the people at the top, then that will kind of trickle down from the bottom, because you can get, it's really easy to bring in a diverse workforce from the bottom up. There are so many talented creators and producers out there, but the issue is A, retaining them, and B, pushing them up to get to those senior levels. So I'd love to see kind of more investment in lower level talent to make sure that they do stay within those organizations, they do make those changes within the business, and they can then progress to senior management to kind of impact those decisions, which is why it's really important what Lorna's doing in terms of that leadership board of the PopHub networks being reflective of the stations and audiences that they're engaging with. And it's something that is a much more longer term strategy and kind of way that we would kind of achieve those sorts of things, but we need to start doing the work now. I think everything that we're talking about is about just doing the work. Like, we could talk about it for days and days and days, but it's just about doing the work. And yeah, sorry,
I just want to make one really quick point. You're right, but sometimes I think organizations need to be a bit more relaxed about the fact that the talent at the top might not be with them. So when I look at the BBC and I see some key people, Spotify, Apple, Atlantic, Warner Brothers, you know, when I look across, there is actually something happening with some Black executives. They're not working for me. I'd like them to be. They've kind of gone beyond that now. There are more and more people, you know, Austin Dabo, there are more and more people sort of filtering there. That's going to be good, right? So I think you're right, but sometimes it can't just be 1 or 2 organizations. It's got to be a lot. So entertainment generally need more, and then you get like more of a network.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, amazing. And if I could slip one in as well, I think some of the big conversations we're having at Bauer, and the guys over there have been great, has been around recruitment and where do you find people? Where are the jobs going and how accessible are they? That's been a huge conversation. I came into radio through a competition, which is wild. I wonder how you get some other jobs if we ran competitions, do you know what I mean? And so, yeah, different levels of entry and how we get people into the industry, I think is a great way of doing it. I've got to wrap up. Look at my time, boys. 7 minutes to go. So I've got to ask one final question, and I've been told by the lovely Naomi that you can only have as a sentence as your answer. But I'll go first to set the tone. This is your question. What is the one thing you would do to make the industry more diverse and open to all? This is a fantastic question, given that we've been talking about inclusivity. And just to mix it perhaps with one of the questions in the Q&A, what piece of advice would you give to leadership? So what one thing would you do to make the industry more diverse and open to all, thinking around leadership and the people at the top, the decision makers? For me this week, I suggested over at R.O.A.R that teams should, and this is a gem that I've nicked from someone who's a friend at the BBC actually, to be 20% diverse. And every team that we move in, they want to see, well, maybe 20% is too low, but a percentage where you are committed to having a diverse team on anything, in front of the mic, behind the mic, it doesn't matter. And I think that makes use of the people that you've got. And I think that's a really good way of pulling people in and showing people different areas of the business that perhaps your mind just never went to before. And so I think that's a really good gem. So that's mine. I'm going to go over to Bernard and love to ask you yours. What one thing would you do to make the industry more diverse and open to all?
About to get controversial now. For me, I think it's about leaders really understanding their fiscal diversity, really understanding how they spend their money within their teams, and understanding the nuance of how you spend your money will really show up what's really going on in your team. That's probably where I'm going to leave it. People best DM me and get more.
You know your DMs are going to be hot now because we've spoken about budget and money, but yeah.
That's true. That's what it comes down to. You know, any investigative journalist will follow the money. So follow the money in your teams and find out what's going on.
And you're saying that will give you a good idea of where the importance lies?
Where you're spending your money, where you're putting your effort, and also how you can balance things out.
Yeah, no, great tip. Thank you. That's amazing. Thank you so much. Nikki, jumping over to your corner, what is the one thing you would do to make the industry more diverse and open to all?
So I'm going to keep on the money theme. I would make sure that every role is paid, especially in London, is paid above London living wage. And I would make it a rule of standard that you pay all invoices early, because if people don't think that they can make a living from the career they're in, they will not make a living in the career they're in.
Yeah. Thank you. Great point. Leanne, jumping over to you, sis. What's the one thing you would do to make the industry more diverse and inclusive?
There are several things, but I guess one of the main things for me would be to invest in and give more opportunities to up and coming talent. That doesn't necessarily mean entry level talent. That means people who are talented, who are creative, who have potential to go far, and actually invest in them and develop them and help them develop their craft so they can go on to do great things.
Thank you. I'm going to come to Lorna and then Ivor next, because every time Lorna says something, Ivor's like, yeah, I'm agreeing, I'm nodding. So I'm hoping she's not going to steal your point.
Oh, no.
What would be your one thing that you would do to make the industry more, on top of all the things that you're doing, to make the industry more diverse and inclusive?
Just agree with Etienne. Ivor, that's what I would do. If I want to make it more diverse, just agree with Ivor, Etienne. No, possibly three things. Number one, I think leaders getting reverse mentorship helps, because you can get into a little bubble and sometimes you need to hear something else. Number two, be honest, and that sometimes means telling the truth about whether something is working or not, but also be honest, because if you really want great ideas, you must make it diverse, and it goes together, so be honest. And three, something that was mentioned already, initiatives like Sound Lab, it's literally putting money to newcomers so they get in and tell their stories. They don't have to be part of a complicated company or anything like that. So those three things.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you. You see, he's laughing. He's like, oh, which one can I take? What's your number one?
Go on, Ivor. Go on. I just hear what he said.
I want to take them all.
You can't, because I was first.
Yeah, I know. I think everybody said something about investment. That if you invest in diversity, it's a no-brainer, because you bring in so many different pools of talent and also different revenue streams, different ways of thinking as a business. It's a no-brainer. And I think also someone mentioned about meeting up with management and having those conversations with people who are outside your bubble, because there could be things that you don't know about, and then you want to kind of kind of to have that discussion within your teams as well as within your radio stations, and given the time on air or those experimental parts, that doesn't happen. I think sometimes we can think of it as, okay, let's have a let's have a meeting about this, but say, you know what, this time in our schedule, we're going to kind of open it up to this group of people. Do you know what I mean? We don't want to care about the ratings. I know that's horrible to say, but we want to kind of give these opportunities to people so they can then air their talent. Because in the end, that's how they're going to kind of get to know about the business. The business is all about putting what you want on air very quickly and seeing if the audience is there, and seeing if the sponsors are there, seeing if the advertisers are there. This is why we love radio, because it's such a medium where you could do something just like that and get just like that a reaction.
Yeah,
that's why we love it.
Oh,
actually, I've got to salute the Audio Content Fund for that, because they've allowed people to really bring some really sharp ideas into radio, which wouldn't have happened without it. So
absolutely.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Oh, I thought you were going to say something.
To me?
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say that's good, because it means that commercial radio get a chance. It can't just be BBC. So those good ideas deserve to be, you know, on commercial radio too. That funding's great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We've run out of time, but I think we might need to do a part 2 of part 2. This is Radio Academy's R.O.A.R Race on Audio and Radio webinar, part 2. And I hope that the conversation will continue really. It's been so refreshing to speak and not to code switch, not to dilute what it is you want to say, and to hear of all the amazing work that is going on in everyone's world and everyone's bubble. So just a massive thank you to Leanne, to Bernard, to Lorna, to Nikki, to Ivor as well. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your expertise and wisdom, and just doing what you're doing to create ways and bringing in new talent and just doing the good stuff that you're doing. And also thank you to Radio Academy. Thank you so much to everyone behind the scenes, the social team, the people, who are absolutely just behind the deck. We salute you. We love you guys. Please keep up the conversation. It's helping the whole industry, and we can't wait for part 2 of part 2. I've been Swarzy Macaly. This has been R.O.A.R. We hope to see you all soon. Take care. Stay safe. Good night.